All right, good morning. Is everyone awake and ready this morning? Some people yes, some people no. There is already men in this room who this is already your second session this morning. You are studying God's Word this morning, and you're back for more. A glutton for punishment. I love it. I love it. Well, hey guys, we have a wonderful treat for you this morning. A good friend of mine, a good friend of Compass, and a man who's been involved in Compass, our family of churches for years and years and years, and his wife Debbie, Rick and Debbie, are traveling all the way here from California, and they want to invest in our church in a particular way, in a way that Rick has spent decades being an expert, somebody who's really informed in many of the areas that we seem sometimes to not be as informed in. And so this weekend is designed to help encourage us and to inform us and to equip us in some areas of finance. And we have decided to separate it like we have for Friday and Saturday so that we can really focus in on the particular age groups that need particular wisdom and insight into their lives and into their finances in a way that they can prepare so as to be faithful stewards of everything that God has given you in your life. And so I'm so excited to have Rick come up here and begin this seminar. But before he does, and he'll talk to you a little bit about him and a little bit about Debbie and their family and what the Lord has done in their life and what the Lord has done to even equip him to be here this morning to instruct us. But before he does, I want to bring us all into a time of prayer where we can ask the Lord to bless this time and have his good hand on us as we think about being good stewards of all that is the Lord's and the little bit that he's given to us to make sure that we use for the advancement of his kingdom, for the good of his church, and for the betterment of even you in your home. So if you will, would you bow your head with me, and we want to talk to God. Heavenly Father, our desire this morning is to orient ourselves rightly to what we have and to recognize that we know we can't take anything with us when we go, but we can position it for more gospel advancement, that we can look back on our lives and legacies, can recognize that we had the right things in mind, that we had the right priorities, and we understood that all things are yours. The earth and the fullness thereof, Lord, is yours, and we know that every little bit that we have has been a stewardship handed to us for your glory, for the advancement of your kingdom, and for the good of your church and the families that make up your church. So this morning, God, we want to worship you through the attentiveness that we give to Rick. So we thank you so much for Rick's life and Debbie, their family, and equipping him to do just this, what he's doing even this morning. So we pray for him. God, give him the words, help him articulate well in such a way for us to comprehend, grasp, and understand our great responsibility with all that we have. And so with that, we want to hand this morning to you, Lord. We ask your good hand of favor upon it. We ask that you would bless it, that it would be something that really helps our church in the months and years to come. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Would you guys give Rick a warm Texas welcome?
Thank you, brother. Well, thank you for coming this morning. Always good to be in Compass Bible Church Hill Country. And my wife Debbie is with me this morning, and I'm glad she could make it. We have 4 adult children and 16 grandchildren. My oldest thought he should have 7, and so they have 7 kids, and they all live pretty far away from us in California. And so we don't get to see them very often, but we do appreciate having lots of children. So the first thing I want to do is give you a little bit of a disclaimer. So I am not a lawyer, and I'm not an active CPA. And so anything that you hear from me, if you have further questions, I would be very happy to talk to you about them. but I'm not authorized by the state of Texas to provide any legal advice or any accounting advice. God saved me at UCLA when I was a sophomore in college. So even that liberal college in UCLA, good things happened, and the Lord grabbed a hold of me. And then I worked at a Big 8 CPA firm. For those of you that know CPA firms, it's a big, at the time, 10,000 employee type of place. And then I went and left them after about 9 years and worked in the real estate business for the largest private home builder in Southern California. And when we went through a tough period of time, the owner didn't want a bunch of us to work for him anymore, so he showed us the door. And a couple guys asked me to join them in a small home building company, so I did that for a while. And then, real estate has its ups and downs, and I'm sure you've seen that here in the state of Texas. And I decided at one point that I'd had enough fun and that I was going to get out. And at the time, Compass Bible Church had just started. And a couple pastors came to me and said, "Oh, Rick, you got to come work for us. You got to help us, with all of our finances." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm a real estate accountant investment guy." And but they convinced me. I felt God's call in my life and started working for them about 20 years ago. We had 15 employees. I think the last payroll we had over 200. So all of the employees here are on our payroll. And so I've had a tremendous thrill of being able to help Compass Bible Church grow and do everything that they do. I had a trust document, which we're going to talk about, when I was 33 years old, because the estate tax exemption amount was $600,000. And I was in the real estate business, and everybody told me I ought to have one, and so I got one. And then a year later, my father died at the age of 58, and he had one, and there were errors in it. And so we had to get the errors fixed, and I didn't even know anything about it. But I did help my mom through a fairly complicated estate process. And then I had a friend I was a leader in a men's Bible study, and it was a guy that was coming to the small groups all the time, and he died. And his wife came into my office weeping because, the emotional stress when you lose a spouse. She says, "I have no idea what to do. Bob took care of everything. I don't know how to write a check." This is back when we used to write checks, but I don't know how to write a check. I don't know. I know income comes in. I know we had some pensions. He even had some oil and gas interest in the fine state of Texas and Oklahoma. And she had no idea, much about those. So I said, "You're going to come and visit me every Thursday at 2 o'clock and bring me all your mail." And so I met with her. It took us about a year, and then I was able to hand her off because we had done everything we needed to do for her so she could function on her own. And it was a blessing to me. But then somebody else's husband died, and what did they say? "Go see Rick." And so at a point in time, and I never set up to do this, I just set up to be the CFO, business administrator. And the next thing I know, I had 6 widows that I'm helping through these various stages of their life. And so that's where I got a lot of practical experience. We also had a Compass employee die during COVID, and he had no will, he had no trust document, he had nothing. And so they asked me to meet with his daughter. He was divorced, but he had a daughter who thought she was the beneficiary. So I agreed to meet with her, and the receptionist says, "Mike's ex-wife and her daughter are ready for you." I thought, oh my goodness, they didn't tell me the ex-wife was coming. But it all turned out okay, but that makes another difficulty, if you were to die without that. So basically, I've learned a lot about estates and wills and trusts and planning, and that's part of what I want to talk to you about today. I also want to talk to you about Social Security and Medicare. Who's already on Social Security? Most everybody? Okay, so then I might just fly through some of that. We'll save that for tomorrow. But I never, when I was in my 50s or late 50s or early 60s, I'm like, I don't know anything about Social Security and Medicare. Well, now I know a lot about it, and that's part of what I'd like to share with you today as well. But let's see if we can go to my next slide, which is really, this scared people away because who wants to talk about their end of their life? But you know what? We need to talk about the end of your life because you're all going to hit the end of your life at some point. So we're going to talk today about planning well. And, that changes, too, as time goes on. In fact, my wife and I are changing our trust document today because we hadn't changed it in a long time because, I don't need guardians anymore. And so there's things like that it's just good to look at that. We're going to talk about the documents that I think that everybody should have. We're going to talk about the process, some of the processes. I've got another category because everybody has another category. And then we're going to talk a little bit about beneficiaries. So why do we plan? We plan because we want an orderly process for winding up your affairs. And you may think everything's in place, and the beneficiaries, and my kids, they love each other, and there aren't going to be any fights. But how many of you have been around people that when somebody dies, the next thing you know, everybody's fighting about everything? Everybody raises their hands. So we think it's a good idea and helpful to you in your Christian walk if you would think about the orderly process for winding up your affairs. And you never know when that's going to be either, right? We want to prevent family relationship problems. You want to leave a legacy in your life of hopefully your children walking with the Lord or following Christ. And that's not guaranteed, but even if you do or you don't have that, you really don't want them to be fighting over different things. I'd like to see you minimize your costs because God's entrusting you with a certain amount of wealth and money, and if you can minimize the costs and leave that to your beneficiaries, that's better. I'd like you to minimize your estate taxes. So when somebody passes away, everything in your estate after the second death, well, actually after the first death too, but everything goes to a fair market value. And if it's more than a certain amount of money, you pay tax, right? Well, fortunately, in the last several years, that number has risen. It's, what happened? So this is doing a little bit different, so. There we go. So now the state tax exclusion is $15 million. When I did my trust, when I was 33, it was $600,000. So some of this, if your estate is worth more than $15 million, then you should for sure have a trust, and you should have a certain type of trust, because you can actually exclude up to $30 million of estate taxes if you plan well. And estate tax rates are 40%. So you think about the tremendously wealthy people, when they pass away, they pay 40% estate tax on everything they have when they die. And so most people look at that and say, why are you talking to me? And I'm saying, well, it's part of what life is. So when you think about the orderly process for winding up your affairs, one of the things that we tell people to do is try to identify all their assets, identify all their liabilities, and the net of those gets distributed to the beneficiary. So if you're ever asked to be a trustee or an executor, that becomes your job, is to do that. You have to gather all the assets together, you have to gather all the liabilities together, and you pay the liabilities off. Then what's ever left goes to the beneficiaries that you have designated in your trust or your will document. So this is going to be, I'm going to run through this really quick because you already know all the assets you have, right? Every single one of them, you know where it is and what it is, including that building in California or that $1,000 deposit that you opened at a bank account 20 years ago that they don't send you statements anymore. But you all have cash, you have checking accounts, savings accounts, some of you will have brokerage accounts. Some of you may put cash in the mattress. In our house, it's in the fridge. So go in the fridge, there's an envelope with, $1,000 in it just in case the banking system collapses. And these are real life examples for me. Some friends of mine, their parents have passed away. They go into dad's office, there's a stack of papers like this, and every 100 papers, there's a $100 bill. And then she looks at another $100 bill. He had stuffed money away that nobody ever could think of. You have investments, again, brokerage accounts. Maybe some of you are in partnerships. And so if that's the case, you need to identify that. You need to tell whoever's working on your estate, hey, I'm in this partnership, and this is how it works. My dad was in like 20 of them, and while he didn't die suddenly, if we had spent a couple hours and he had explained some things to me, my life would have been a lot easier than it was because I had to hunt around for all the information, and it was difficult. So you may have partnerships. You may have some stocks that you hold outside of your brokerage accounts. Somebody, maybe your parents gave you, 100 shares of Apple that's not really in a brokerage account. If they did, you're doing pretty well. Some people have gold that they keep in their safes. Working interest in oil and gas partnerships. I figured in Texas you all have those, right? No? Okay. Digital currencies get tough too. If you've invested in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, you really have to have that information because that's the only way you can do anything with that asset. You got to have that long number, or you have to have a wallet that's secured. Talked to a friend of mine 2 weeks ago. He lost $300,000 because he couldn't. Actually, it was stolen out of his account, and he couldn't prove what his number was, it's a sad thing. Bitcoin could be a great investment, but you just have to keep track of all the nitty-gritty details. You might have a whole life insurance policy that has a cash surrender value in it. You should identify that. You might have a primary or secondary home. You might have rental properties. You might have a timeshare, which is a liability. Sorry, Linda Cavadoy. I said that when I was here the last time about financial matters. I said, don't have a timeshare and don't have a pet. And she came up to me and said, I'm in sin. I said, no, you're not in sin. But what if you had a timeshare? Are your heirs going to know about that? Personal property, which is everything else other than your house. Think of what's in your house. And again, you know better than anybody else. Safety deposit box. You got trucks, you got cars, you got RVs, you got jewelry, paintings. Maybe you have some musical instruments. Maybe you loaned some money to one of your kids and you want it all even at the end of the day. So how are you tracking those loans or other relatives? Maybe you loaned your neighbor $10,000 to start a business and you pass away. Well, who's going to know that you loaned it? Maybe, hopefully they're honest. You might have some intellectual properties that are worth something. Patents, trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, logos, images, books. For sure, well, I hope you have a retirement plan, either a 401k or a 403b. At the average age of the people here, I hope you've converted that into an individual retirement account at this point because they're easier to manage. Most 401ks and 403bs, you only get so many selections from your employer. But we need to keep track of those. On the IRAs, they need to know whether they're a tax-deferred IRA or it's a Roth IRA. Because when you pull money out of a tax-deferred IRA, you get to pay taxes on them. If you pull money out of a Roth IRA, you don't pay taxes on them. So ultimately, I'm going to suggest you have a list of all of these. But you should have identified whether those are tax-deferred or Roth IRAs. Many people have pension plans, and a lot of times the pension plan is structured so when the husband dies, the wife still gets some of the pension. Some of them don't work that way. So, these are things that you should really know how they work. You might have annuities. So then we go to the unfund side, but maybe you have some bills Hopefully nobody has credit card debt, a mortgage on your house. Maybe you have a promissory note because you loaned money to somebody. Maybe you have a car payment or student loans, loan guarantees. So, you can identify all your assets and liabilities, and that's a good thing to do. Well, October 21st of 2024, in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article with the heading of, "I'm way too young for estate planning." Or am I? I thought planning for death and injury was something I wouldn't have to worry about for years. The truth is, anybody over 18 should consider this. Now, this is not me. This is a writer in the Wall Street Journal a year ago. Her name is Julia Carpenter. She says she's a 30-something. And she talks about her grandmother's big blue book. So, everybody should have a big blue book where you list everything that you have with all of the details in it that's set aside somewhere that in the unlikely event you get killed on your way home today, somebody can walk in and find all of that information. Now, it may not be a big blue book. It may be a little file like this. You can buy some of these online fairly cheap. You can put it on a hard drive, or you could put it in the cloud. However you save it, you should save it and make sure whoever needs to get to it can get to it. So a 2024 survey of U.S. adults by caring.com, the senior community platform, found that just 24% of the respondent ages 18 to 34 said they had a will. 24%. So 75% of people don't have that. Again, I think all of you said you do, so that's good. But people say, I don't want to do it. They procrastinate. I don't have enough assets to worry about it. Okay, well, what's enough? There's always something. And the employee that died, we had a $10,000 life insurance policy on him. And so you never really know what kind of assets you're going to have. It's too expensive. It does cost some money. I don't have anybody to leave the assets to, or it takes too long and it's too complicated. Those are the reasons people don't do this. Or inflation's going to eat all my money up anyway. They updated that in 2025, so a little over 25% have a will. Just over 10% have a living trust. There are some way wealthy people that do different things, which we're not going to talk about. And over 55% say, I have no estate planning documents. So these are the documents that I think everybody in this room should have sometime in their life. You should have a last will and testament. If you own or have any wealth at all, you should have a revocable living trust. Everybody should have one of those. I'll tell you why as we go along, but everybody should have an advanced healthcare directive. What happens when you cannot make medical decisions on your own? Who gets that? Normally your spouse would get that. If your spouse is deceased, who's going to decide whether to pull the plug or not pull the plug? Well, you have Pastor Hayden, and you have Pastor Evan, and you have Kayla. You have other people that you can talk to here to help you through that. But ultimately, the hospital or institution that you're in, they want to know who's making these decisions. And it's good to get that taken care of before you get to that point. I also recommend powers of attorney. When you get to a certain age, you want to let somebody have the same legal rights that you have to make decisions, financial decisions. It's time to sell the car, who's going to sign the pink slip. And if you have a power of attorney that says my son or daughter can stand in my place and do any financial transaction as if they were me, that becomes helpful. Trust me, these four things, and they're fairly standard documents. Okay, these are not complicated documents. I've got some places you can go on the internet where you can get at least the first three done for free if you want. And I'm going to highly recommend that when we get there. The other things that would be helpful to put in your blue book is, copies of your passports and your driver's license. And if one of the spouses has died, a death certificate. My dad died at 58. My mom died 35 years later. Well, I went to open a trust bank account, and they say, well, where's your dad's death certificate? How do I know that he's really died? Because I had my mom's. And I said, 35 years ago? I have no idea. But I could get one, because you just go down to the county recorder's office and they can give you one, if the county where that person died. So if you move around a lot, where is that? So I'm just saying, hold on to those death certificates, put them in. They could be very helpful when someone picks up the pieces. If you own property, if you had the deeds, although with title insurance companies that isn't as important anymore. Digital logins and passwords. Can they get into your computer? Can they get into your phone? If you use a password manager, which I hope most of you do, what's the password for the password manager? So you should leave those things. I think you should put your most recent tax return in that folder. Because, again, whoever's coming along afterwards, it gives them some idea of what your income and expenses look like. So I find that tax return is helpful. Then I also recommend a letter of instruction. I'm going to go over that in a minute. But these are non-legally binding directions, right? I want my daughter Sally to get this bowl, or I want my son to get my wood shop saws. Not all the saws. This son should get this saw, and this son should get this drill press, and whatever it is. It's a letter of instruction that you can leave for whoever's managing it for you for the things that are important to you. Although I would recommend give it to them while you're still alive so you can watch them enjoy using some of these things. Because when you pass, they're just going to wholesale, get rid of some of that. And those of you that have done this with your parents, you already know what that looks like. If you have your funeral arrangements all set, I want these 3 hymns sung, I want these 3 people to do my eulogy, and I want this person to sing, put that in your blue box or your file. If you don't have these, or they are unclear, someone will step in and wrap up your affairs. So let's talk about intestate succession. If you die without a will or a trust document and no direction, somebody has to go to the county court and petition to be what's called a personal representative. So if Linda Cavadoy dies and Caesar dies, and the girls don't want to have anything to do with this, somebody goes to the court and petitions the court that says, I want to be appointed as a personal representative to wrap up the Cavadoy affairs. And maybe there's 2 or 3 people that want to do that because they might want to get compensated for their work. And so the state has an ordering of who gets to be approved. And you have to kind of go in their order. Now, if nobody is in step 1, then they go to 2 or 3 or 4. And all I'm saying is that the courts are going to make that decision for you. And personal representatives, I talked about that. They may assign people that may have never even known you. And they may certainly assign people that don't share your values. And so that's why, can you please do one of these documents? It would be very helpful. It sounds like most of you had. Well, this is Jesse Beck. How many know Jesse Beck? I would be shocked if anybody knew Jesse Beck. So that's him on his motorcycle. And there was a Montana Supreme Court ruling for the estate of Jesse Beck, if you want to know dates and stuff. He dies without a will or a trust. His only child petitions the court to be the personal representative. So he was married and divorced. He had a daughter. The daughter stepped up, and she would be in the line. She petitioned the court to be the personal representative. Well, Jesse's brother Jason submitted a video from Jesse's cell phone, recorded 4 days before his death. And it was a tragic death. I mean, he was on his motorcycle, he pulled over to help somebody in an accident, and actually a police officer came along, didn't see him, hit him and the person that he was helping, and they both died. So this is a tragic, this isn't you were going to die because you had stage 4 lymphoma. But so he's on his motorcycle, he pulls out his cell phone, and this is what he says. I, Jesse Beck, give all of my possessions. If anything happens to me whatsoever, this is 4 days before he dies. I give all my possessions, everything to Jason Beck, my brother. Christina Fontenay does not get one thing, not one thing. And he hangs up. And he sends it to his brother Jason. So Jason goes to the court and says, you know, the daughter doesn't get anything. I'm the brother. I get it all. The court rules against him. So this will be more important maybe for tomorrow. You know, all you 30-somethings that think everything's digital and video and you can put it on your cell phone, it doesn't work. And it's true in California. It's true in Texas. These things have to be in writing. So I want you to get them, and I want you to put them in writing. Texas has the same rules. So what is a last will? If any of you have seen this or you've watched movies, you know, you're the testator. I, Rick Talcott, reside in the city of New Braunfels in the county of state of Texas. Being of sound mind, not acting under duress or undue influence. Nobody's making me do this. And fully understanding the nature and extent of my property and disposition thereof, do hereby make, publish, declare, blah, 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 blah. This is what happens with my stuff when I die. It's that easy. It's not hard, right? Because you've already done all the other things. Who's the testator? You're the testator. Why the legal profession uses all these complicated names, it's just beyond me. Sometimes different states use the term executor instead of testator. So it could be executor. Devise and bequeath. We got beneficiaries. If you have children, which all of you may or may not have children, they probably have kids. You should get your kids to do all of this. Because if they die and they don't have a will, who takes care of the kids? The same problem, if you haven't identified who that is, people petition the court and say, I'm the aunt, and that may be the evil aunt, goes to the court and says, I want to take care of the kids. But you should have a successor, executor, because what happens if you say, I'm going to do it and I'm dead? Then what happens? So there's usually a provision for somebody else. This document, it can be witnessed. It doesn't have to be notarized. And it goes through something called probate. Okay, remember, I want you to minimize your cost. In the state of Texas, cost with a will is going to run you $1,500 to $3,500. That's an average based on ChatGPT. For the state of Texas, the cost to have your estate processed through the state, $1,500 to $3,500. If you don't have it, it's going to be more, maybe $35,000 to $5,000. And these are for just normal-sized estates. And then a small estate affidavit, if you want a lawyer to just fill out a form that you can take around to the different banks and things, they say that's going to be $1,500 to $2,000. In Texas, those are good numbers. In California, they're 4 times that number. So another great reason to live in the state of Texas. Name an executor, identify the children, name guardians for your children and your pets. Linda, someone's going to have to take care of the pets. And your daughters probably aren't going to want to do that for you. Identify the beneficiaries, we're going to talk about that. And then the real property that we've already really talked about. And there's some legal stuff in this form document. Wills go through probate unless the estate is less than $75,000. So all of these rules apply, but if the estate's $10,000, you don't have to deal with the courts, you don't have to deal with anybody else. You can just have somebody handle the estate and there'll never be a problem. So, but if it's over $75,000, then it goes through probate. We've talked about the legal costs. I didn't talk about how long it takes to go through probate for, if you all own real estate and have equity in your house, these probates can go a long time. In California, it can go over a year. There's a friend of mine whose husband died, and he had 30 classic cars. And it's been a year and a half, and she can't get the estate done because she hasn't sold all the cars yet. And so, when you get over the tragedy, like the kids get over the tragedy that you've passed, and they think they're going to get something, but you're going through probate, it's tough to get anything to them until probate is complete. Because the judge wants to know, are these all the assets? Are these all the liabilities? Can I really distribute this money to these people? So it takes a long time. Okay, that's a will and a trust. My suggestion, though, is you get a revocable living trust. They don't go through probate. So when somebody passes and you have a trustee or you're the trustee, you can just act and you can do whatever your document says to do. They're a little bit more comprehensive than a will, although they do have grantors and trustees and beneficiaries that play the same roles as they would with a will. When you have a revocable living trust, like ours is the Talcott family trust dated December something, 1988. And I just thought that's how you have to do your wills. But you can name it anything you want. Your trust. You can name it anything you want. But whatever you name it, you should go to your bank account and change your bank account to be for me, Talcott Family Trust. So if you look at our bank account, our checks say the Talcott Family Trust on them. If you have brokerage accounts, they should be the Talcott Family Trust, not the Talcott Family Trust, whatever your trust name is. Your home should be in the trust. Everything you own should be in the trust, except for cars, things, jewelry, you don't put that in anybody's name. But anything who's the owner should be in the name of the trust. And again, I had an example 6 months ago where the trust says this bank account is in the trust. But when they go to the bank and they ask the bank who's the beneficiary, it's not the trust. Well, the bank's not going to care about your trust document. They're going to say, this is what this customer said. The beneficiary should be in that bank account. So when we do a revocable living trust, you got to make sure that everything vests properly. Ownership is proper. There's the directions for the net assets. The trustee has a fiduciary responsibility, same thing in a will. They have to follow the trust document. So if you're worried about who you're assigning as the trustee, you should assign somebody that you trust. But they don't have a lot of leeway, right? If the trust says 99% goes to son A and 1% goes to son B, they can't change that because that's the way trust documents work. So whatever you put in your trust document, just know that whoever is taking care of it has a fiduciary responsibility. As I said, it needs to be in writing. You can put your guardians in this, right? I want my kids to go to these people. It does require a notary. Your bank will do that, or your local postal service company will do that. It allows for the tax planning. Remember, if your estate's over 15 million or 30 million, it's great tax planning. You should do that. Can I do a little sidebar here on gift tax implications? How much money can you give in a gift before it's a problem in the eyes of the IRS to any one person? I think it's $19,000 right now. So everybody thinks, oh no, what if I give them 20? Is that taxable to them? How does that work? Well, let's say you gave somebody 20 and the current IRS number is 19, that $1,000 difference, it goes to reduce to 15 million. So I'm here to tell you, you can, with today's current estate tax number for most everybody, you can give as much gifts to your kids as you want to, and you don't have to worry about it. There's a little freebie for the day. Amendments are easy. You should still have a last will. Even if you do a trust document, I want you to have a will. And the will says, if I forgot to put something in the trust, put it in the trust. That's what it says. It's called a pour over, but really that's all it is. The details of your estate remain private. That's why the very wealthy do this too. They don't want everybody to know, Jim Cook's value of all his assets and liabilities. If it goes through probate, then it's a public document and everybody gets to see it. If you have a revocable living trust, nobody gets to see it other than the beneficiaries of your trust. They generally become irrevocable upon the date of death. It's called a revocable living trust. So you can revoke it if you're of sound mind and body. You can revoke it the day before you die, or you can amend it the day before you die. But once you die, it's usually irrevocable, which means you better make sure it's up to date and it says everything you want it to say. Again, they use different names, but it's all the same. The power of the trustees, basically they have the power to do what the trust document says, to sell your house, to sell your cars, to sell whatever you have. There's a section in there that says the trustees should be compensated for their work. And many families don't want to compensate. The trustees don't want to be compensated. And that's fine. But some are hard, and they take a lot of time. And if somebody's putting a lot of time in, that means they're not working, and you should provide for some sort of compensation for the trustee, depending, again, on how complex your trust is. If you want an airplane and they got to sell an airplane, well, I wouldn't know how to sell an airplane. How would I even do that? That would take you time to figure out just how to sell some of those things. So I know it's noble for trustees to say, oh, I love them, I don't want a fee. But just know that it could be very hard. And as I said, this document does have to be notarized. And they don't go through probate. So that's what's in the trust. You may have, I mentioned a bank account. Let's make sure the beneficiaries are the same. Because if your bank account and brokerage accounts have different beneficiaries than your trust document has, then everybody throws up their hands and says, I'm not touching it because I don't want to break a law. You might have life insurance. You might have some personal life insurance or employer life insurance. And you ought to make sure all those beneficiaries are all the same if you can. And we'll talk about that when we get to the beneficiaries. Advanced healthcare directives. Who gives medical direction if you can't? That document answers that question. Doctors will want it. Now, they'll take care of you in an emergency, and they'll make all the appropriate medical decisions if it's an emergency. They have the legal right to do that. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but if it comes down to, well, you could do this or you could do this, who's making that decision? Hospitals are going to want it. Pharmacies are going to want it. And if you gave a general power of attorney to somebody, that person can go to the pharmacy and say, I have the right to pick up, these medications. DNRs do not resuscitate. Again, this is stuff we don't like to talk about, right? But we probably should. If something happens to you, do you want extraordinary efforts to keep you alive? Or do you just want to say, God is taking me home, and I've got a life of walking faithfully with Him, and so I don't want to be resuscitated. So the advanced healthcare directive will just identify that for you. Sometimes, even though you have these, the hospital might want you to sign one of their forms. Same thing for hospice. Someone has to sign those forms. And it's for adults only. Like, you don't have advanced healthcare directives for children because they can't enter into them, because they can't sign a contract. But the funny thing happens when your kids or your grandkids turn 18, you have no rights over their medical information anymore. Right? My son had a mole removed 2 weeks before he turned 18, and my wife called and said, well, what did the pathology say? Oh, we can't talk to you about that. Your son's 18. What do you mean you can't talk to him? I brought him in. He's my son. He lives in my house. I'm paying you. You got to tell me what it is. And they wouldn't do it. Under HIPAA, they can't tell you these things. And so some people have taken it upon themselves that they do an advanced healthcare directive for their 18-year-old. And then when you go in, you can show them, that 18-year-old's given me the right to get this information. I don't know many people that do that because the doctor has a form, they bring the kid in, they make the kid sign the form because he's over 18, so he can obligate himself and sign a contract. Powers of attorney, I've talked to you about that. You can act in the place in all matters. That's a general power of attorney. But if you do that, and your son or daughter sells your boat, you gave him the right to do it. You can sell your house. You can do anything he wants. So then there's specific powers of attorney that you can narrow it and say, well, they can only do this. Like they can't sell my boat, or they can't sell my car, or they can't do this, they can't do that. It's probably worthwhile to spend a little bit of time with an attorney on that. Okay, I said we do the letters of instruction. These are for low-value items. They're not legally binding. Sometimes they're heirlooms or keepsakes or artwork. Maybe there's something in your house that, how are you going to divvy up the artwork? Your china, your silver, your sports equipment. Maybe you have an ice machine that you want somebody to have. I don't know. It's an inside joke. You can put user IDs and passwords here if you want. Furniture, electronics, tools, sewing machine. Maybe the daughter wants a sewing machine. Or quilts. These are things that you're not going to document. But it'd be nice if the trustee knew that. So when all the girls come in and say, I want the sewing machine, and you've said, this person gets the sewing machine. Makes it easier. Surfboards, maybe, oh, wait a minute, you don't have surfboards. How about boots? This kid gets this boot. I don't know. So this gets important too, is once you're all doing that and you're all committed to me that if you don't have it up to date, you will do that. Let the people know where the documents are. In fact, you could even give them copies. That's the third point. But I recommend you discuss it with them. Like back to my example, 99% goes to this one and 1% goes to that one. You should have a family meeting. You should bring them all in and you can say, this is what we're doing with our estate. And you should tell them. And then you can explain to the one that only got 1% versus the one that got 99% why you did that. And let them be mad at you before you die. Instead of be mad at you the rest of their life, at least they'll know, why you did that if you did that. So I recommend that you do that. You don't have to do that right away, but I think it's helpful to do that. You should discuss the composition of your estate with your beneficiary. I talked to somebody early today. You should get your assets appraised at the first death so that husband and wife, don't mean to pick on Linda Cavadoy again, but she's been so nice to us over the years. I just can't tell you. If she dies first, I want their house appraised. Because let's say she paid $100,000 for the house and it's worth $500 when she dies. Tax law says that the cost of that house is now $500 and not $100. So if Caesar sells it for $600,000 a year later, the capital gain on that is the difference between $600 and the cost, which got adjusted at the date of death up to $500, is only $100,000, and under current tax law, there is no tax on that. If it was at $100,000 and he sold it for $600, the law still stands. You can get an appraisal, but if you've done it 15 years later, then you got to hire an appraiser that says, well, what was my house worth 15 years ago? And then it gets a little more dicey as to whether the IRS is going to accept that or not. So get all of your assets appraised on the first death because that's what's going to happen at the second death as well. The trustee will do that to make sure you're under the $15 million. All right, too complicated, Rick, I don't want to do it. You can go to freewill.com and they will do all these for you for free. There are others, trustandwills.com. There's ethos.com. There's LegalZoom. They're going to charge you. Some of these others will charge you. There's Willmaker. There's FastWill. You can all do Google searches. But there's a way to do this for free. And it's kind of like TurboTax. For those of you that use TurboTax, they ask you questions and you have to answer them. Now, some of these questions are hard. Who gets what? And what happens if they have kids and they're not living? Does their share go to their kids, or does it go to the wife? Or, what happens with it? So I know these are difficult decisions. You don't want to think about them. But if you think about them now, it's going to be a lot easier than later. So let's talk about beneficiaries for a minute, which is part of the reason that I'm here. The Bible clearly says that family members should be beneficiaries of your estate. They should be. Strangers should not. So, support that. Ricky T, as they call me sometimes in Aliso Viejo. Proverbs 13:22. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And I better say, you should do that. That's biblical. Job 42:15. And in all the land there were no women so beautiful as Job's daughters, and their father gave them an inheritance amongst their brothers. So you can leave it to your boys and to your girls. Okay? No distinction in God's eyes for that. Proverbs 19:14a. House and wealth are inherited from fathers. Inheritance, is a good thing. Luke 15. What does the son want? Dad, give me my inheritance early. And the dad said, well, okay. I always wonder how that worked out. Did he add it all up and divide it into two and give him that? And did he have to sell his anything? Whatever. That's fine. Lamentations 5:2 says, though, our inheritance has been turned over to strangers and our homes to foreigners. So let's not do that. Hayden told me he recently took you through this passage, Luke 12:13-21, talks about the rich fool. So for time purposes, I'm not going to talk about that. But you'll remember there was a family dispute. Somebody came to Christ and said, tell my brother to give me, my inheritance. And Jesus says, I'm not the judge of that. You guys work that out. And he gave 2 warnings. He warned them about covetousness and about the abundance of possessions. He's always talking to us about his concern for that. And so I would leave that to you as well. The land of a rich man, he scaled up too fast. He had a real estate development project. He had to build bigger barns. He had worldly success. Everybody looked at him and said, wow, look at all the barns he's built. This guy is great. But that translated into his soul matter. He sat back and his soul was comfortable and confident. And God says, you're a fool. Your life is over. Your plans didn't work. And who's going to inherit your stuff? And right after that, he says, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven and be rich toward God. Ecclesiastes 6:2, a man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires, yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity, a grievous evil. Ecclesiastes 4:8. One person who has no other, either son or brother, yet there is no end to all his toils, and his eyes are never satisfied with riches, so that he never asks himself this question, for whom am I toiling and depriving myself of pleasure? Why am I doing this? Why am I working 80 hours a week and building a vast amount of wealth when it's not going to go to anybody? And this is also vanity and an unhappy business. Still going to talk about beneficiaries in a minute, but number 1, please get a will in place. These are my 6 things that you have to do. Have a revocable living trust. Get your advanced health care directive completed. Write out your instruction letter, even if it has to be updated. Make sure your blue box is comprehensive and complete. And then be generous with God. He's been generous with you all your life. When you think about your beneficiaries, you should be generous with him. And then you should think and pray about your beneficiaries. Because I do want to talk a little bit about stewardship, in 2 Corinthians 8:7. But as you excel in everything, in faith, speech, in knowledge, in all earnestness, and in our love for you, see that you excel in this act also, which is the act of giving. Giving back to the church that you've spent your lifetime in or that you're currently in. People like to define legacy giving, and I hate that term because it's like, well, I'm going to give this to my church, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. The legacy in this case isn't necessarily the legacy of you. It's the legacy of continuing the church after you're gone, right? The legacy of knowing that Compass Bible Church Treasure Valley will continue well after you depart the earth. It's a gift by will, especially of money or other personal. Those are the definitions. Did you know in the next 25 years we're going to have the largest transfer of wealth that the United States has ever experienced? There's going to be $80 to $100 trillion worth of assets transferred from our generation to the next generation. 80% of it's going to go to individuals, and 20% of it's going to go to charities. And so as you continue to think and pray about, well, what should I do with my estate? I would just say, again, God's given you everything. He's given you the ability to generate wealth. And I mentioned this to a friend of mine 2 years ago while I was still the chief financial officer and business administrator at Compass Bible Church, of which I am retired now. And Ryan Hawley, who some of you know, took my place. And Vera Sua still supports the church as well back in Aliso Viejo. But I mentioned to him that I have a friend that I do that's very wealthy. He calls himself a Christian, I don't know. And he's got a company worth $250 million, and he's leaving it all to his boys. And they're not believers. And I'm like, why would we do that? So I told that to my friend. He came up to me a year later and he goes, Rick, remember when we were walking, I didn't even realize I did this, but when we were walking in the hallway and you told me about that friend of yours, and that's why you're continuing to be on his board and help him with things, to have an influence? We have a son that won't talk to us. He's not a believer. He hates our Christianity. Will have nothing to do with us. And we wrote him out of the will and out of our estate plan because he would waste the money that God gave me to pass on by spending it in areas that you would never spend the money, right? They probably support Planned Parenthood. They probably support other things. And the thought of your estate going to support worldly things when God gave you everything he gave you, it's a good thing to think about. And so I'll leave you with this, in Hebrews 13:5 says, keep your life free from the love of money. Be content with what you have, or he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So don't stress over this. You should pray about how this should work. You should really make sure there's an orderly process that happens when you're gone. Okay, retirement planning. We're going to look at whether this is biblical or not to do retirement planning. We're going to look at Social Security. We're going to look at qualified retirement plans. We're going to look at non-qualified retirement plans. So is it biblical? Proverbs 27:23, and this applies to planning in general. Know well the condition of your flocks and give attention to your herds, because that was their riches in an agrarian society. For riches do not last forever, nor does a crown endure to all generations. So you should keep track of what you have and know what you have and be ready to pass it on to the next generation. The plans of the diligent surely lead to abundance, but everyone who is hasty comes only to poverty. So it's biblical to plan, it's biblical to budget. I've been over that with some of them. But I want to define a term here. We're going to talk about stewardship. And we're talking about retirement and stewardship. And in Numbers 8:23 to 26, I'm looking for when should you retire? If God's given you your life and you should steward it properly. And I just retired, but I didn't really retire. I retired out of the 60-hour work week, 50-hour work week, where I was working lots of hours for Compass Bible Church, taking it from one campus to 6 or 7 campuses, 15 employees to over 200. And now we've got a guy that's doing a great job of it. But in Numbers 8:23-26, it says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying," this applies to the Levites. The Levites were to take care of the temple. "From 25 years old and upward, they shall come to do duty in the service of the tent of meeting. And from the age of 50 years, they shall withdraw from the duty of the service and serve no more." So you get to retire at 50. Is that what I'm saying? No, I'm not saying that. Because these same ones, they minister to their brothers in the tent of meeting by keeping guard. But they shall do no service inside the tent of meeting, lest you shall do to the Levites in assigning their duties. So there is no retirement in the Bible. Paul didn't go to Patmos and build a golf course and improve his golf game. He didn't go to the beaches in Florida and walk along the sandy shores. They still stayed active in the ministry, which is what I'm doing at Compass Bible Church, and I'm able to do some of these things. But that's how the Levites worked. Psalm 90:10 says, "The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80. I'm for that because I'm 70, so I hope I have strength to 80. "Yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away." Which is true, right? You always hear, time is flying faster than we ever imagined that it would fly. So we need to keep that in mind as we think about even the concept of retiring. Well, John Piper has a famous message about this called Seashell's Sermon. And if you wanted to listen to it, it's great. I mean, Piper's passionate about this. But he says that when I face God, I don't want to say, for the last 10 years of my life, I gathered these 100 seashells. Aren't they pretty? Is that what you want God to say about you when you retire? No, God's, hopefully if you've planned well and you have enough money set aside, now you can do ministry full time and the church doesn't have to pay you for any of it, which is a great thing. He has a book called Don't Waste Your Life, John Piper. I made several of my kids read that before they went off to college. I've recently reread it because our men's Bible study thought it'd be a good idea to read it. And his whole premise is, don't waste your life. And it isn't to build bigger barns and bigger barns. Don't waste your life to service to the King. What have you done for the kingdom? You know, what have you done to help Jesus Christ be known and to know him? So that's a great book. He does have another book called Rethinking Retirement by John Piper. Most of you are retired, but that's a great book. Finishing Life for the Glory of God. One that I've really benefited from over the last 5 or 6 years is called Reimagine Retirement, Planning and Living for the Glory of God. And C.J. Cagle, he's not a John Piper, he's not another guy, but he has this book that I think is really, really good. A lot of times people retire and they don't know what to do. Statistically, sometimes when people retire, they lose purpose in their life and they die just because they don't have anything really tangible to do. And he's all about, when you retire, make sure you're moving from this into this level of ministry into this level of ministry. But he's a numbers guy too. I mean, he really helps. And he understands markets, he understands how to invest. I know the little blurb said tomorrow I'm going to talk about how to invest. I'm not going to talk about how to invest. Business administrators and CFOs of churches, they don't do that, because I don't want to be responsible for a bad decision somewhere down the line. So that's a great book. So let's talk about Social Security. Everybody gets to pay into Social Security whether you like to or not on earned income. The current limit is $176,100, and so If you make that amount of money, you're having that withheld from Social Security, withheld from your check. Your employer matched that all your life, and they set it off in an account for you, so when you retire, they give it back to you, right? Well, right now, in 2034, the Social Security fund is going to be, whoop, gone. And so people say it won't be solid anymore, and it won't be enough. And so people are worried about that. And I would say when I started out as a CPA right out of college, I heard this same thing. It's going to run out of money. What are we going to do? Well, I don't know a Republican or a Democrat that's going to get rid of it. I just don't. I think for everybody in this room, there's going to be enough money at the end of the day to be able to draw on it. If you hadn't taken it, I would have shown you this slide that said when you hit 62 years old, you can take Social Security, but you will get 30% less in the monthly payment that they make to you than you would get if you waited until you were at full retirement age. Now, this is one thing the government's already done. It used to be 65. Well, now you can't retire, what was it for us, Deb? 67 and 9 months or something, or 3 months. And they keep moving that later. That's how they take care of a potential deficit. But I wanted you to know that you could take it at 62. If you waited till you were 63, you would get 5% more. If you wait till you're 64, you get 10% more. And 65 and 66 and 67. So your full retirement number is your full retirement number. And if you wait till you're 67, you get that number. Now, if you're in bad health right now and you don't think you're going to live till you're 65, then you shouldn't wait till you're 67 to take it, because you're not going to get anything. And so just keep that in mind. I got another slide that I think you're going to like. And then if you want to wait longer, you could take your full retirement at 67, or if you waited another year, your number's going to be 8% more. And if you wait till you're 69, it's going to be 8% more. And if you wait till you're 70, it's going to be 8% more. So you actually get 124% of whatever you would have gotten when you first retired at full retirement age. Now, I think I went 69 and a half, because in the next slide you'll see why. But I recommend people go to 70, or as long as they can. And one reason I recommend that is if the husband is the highest wage earner and he waits till 70 and he dies, the wife gets the full amount. So if I was getting $5,000 a month and I die, my wife still gets that $5,000 a month. If I took it when I was 62, which was 24% less plus another 30% less, she would get less. And I want to take care of my wife when I'm gone, so that's the reason that we waited. I was going over this with the Cowboys last night, and I found this cool slide that says, okay, if I take it when I'm 62, I'm getting the money now, and so I get the benefit of that money now, and I can invest it and get returns on that. Maybe I should just take it now. But in a pure mathematical, without any returns on it, the break-even point is like 77, 78, maybe 79. So it says right there, 78 years and 8 months. So if you're going to live more than 78 years and 8 months, don't take it at 62. So if you know when you're going to die, the math becomes super easy. People would come into my office, should I retire? Do I have enough money? I go, I can answer that for you. I can answer it. I just have to ask you one question, a couple of questions, like, well, how much do you have and other things. But I need to know when you're going to die. And they laugh, just like you laugh, because God doesn't reveal that to us. And so, anyway, if you're going to live more than 78, you should not take it at 62. The break even for taking it at full retirement is 82. If you're going to live more than 82 years and 6 months, you'll have more gross dollars if you wait until you're 70. And in today's environment, some of us are living that long, some of us are not. And so those are personal decisions that you're going to have to make on your own. I'm not going to help you make those. But does that make sense? Right? Why does the government want you to wait till you're 70? Because they don't think you're going to live past 82 and 6 months. And they have tables that actuaries have put together that says this is how long you're going to live. So the joke is when I do counsel with people, I say, okay, well, you don't know how long you're going to live. Tell me about your parents and your grandparents. Oh, they all died at 60, 65. Well, then take it. Take it. And Deb and I have a friend that did that because everybody in his family died of heart disease. So at 62, he took it. He's 83. So there you go. So let's say you maximized the amount that you gave into Social Security all your life. Like when I was working for Coopers and Lybrand, I never hit the max. But as you get raises and you get paid more, if you hit the max and you wanted to take Social Security at 62, you would get $2,800 a month, $2,831. If you waited to full retirement, you would get $4,018. And if you waited until you were 70, you would get $5,108 every month. Those are the kind of the current numbers. They change all the time. They change all the time. Every year they get adjusted. And it depends on what you put in. Maybe you had years where you didn't put the max in, and so these numbers are inflated. The other thing these numbers don't show you is you say, well, I can make it on $5,100 a month. It's taxable to you. The IRS says, okay, you get your Social Security, but if you make certain amounts of income, then up to 85% of your Social Security income is taxable to you. So just keep that in mind as you think through this. Payments are adjusted annually based on inflation. So all the retirees were pretty happy a couple of years ago when inflation was 9% because their number went up 9%. And if it goes up 2%, it's 2%. So those get adjusted every year. They are taxed. There are 9 states that have income tax that do not tax Social Security. And then there's the 7 or 8, like Texas, that has no income tax, so you don't have to worry about that. But in California, we have high tax rates, and so you're going to pay federal income tax and you're going to pay state income tax. So if you're working when you're 62 and you have good income, you're going to pay 85% of whatever you get is going to go in and you're going to pay tax on it. And you may pay tax on it at 35%. So then maybe you don't want to take it at 62. So it's complicated. Don't forget, too, that the Medicare premiums that you pay are deducted from that. So if you got $5,100 and you're paying $185 for Medicare premiums, then that check that actually goes into your account is something less than that. I talked a little bit about spousal benefits. When I die, my wife's going to get the full amount. But she also gets, when I first apply for Social Security, she gets the higher number of 2 different numbers. One number is what she's getting at her full retirement, or if she took it at 62, whatever that number is. So let's say it was $1,000, because my wife was basically a homemaker all of her life and did ministry, as much as she could. And so she was getting $1,000 a month. Well, when I applied, she gets half of whatever I get at full retirement age. And so some people go into Social Security, their wife takes it, they take it, and they don't know that the wife gets half of yours from day one when you actually apply and start taking your Social Security income. Does that make sense? Should I say that again? So when the husband actually takes Social Security, the wife's number is half of that number, whatever it was at full retirement age. So remember back to this slide I had here? The 4,018. If that was the number for me, she would get $2,000 a month now, not whatever her earnings earned her, which was less than that. Now, if her earnings were higher, she just keeps the higher earnings. But for some of us whose wives didn't work a lot outside the home, you get half of that number. Okay, so I would suggest that that's probably not going to be enough to live on, even in the great state of Texas. So you should have invested, and again, this may be more for tomorrow, but some of you may have defined benefit plans or pension plans, and those are,
I just got a question. Sorry to interrupt.
yeah,
Nowadays, a lot of women are making more than a husband makes.
right.
Flip-flop, if the wife makes whatever, 200 a year, and the husband makes 100.
It may. Nobody's ever asked me that. I would have to look that up. I'll look that up this afternoon, see if I can find an answer to that. Some of you may have worked for what's the biggest employer, longest employer in Texas? What is it? HGB. Maybe you worked for HGB all your life, and they had a defined benefit plan that says when you retire, you get the average of the last 5 years of whatever you made. There are different formulas for different companies, and then they just pay you that the rest of your life. It's called a defined benefit. This is your benefit you're going to get for as long as you live, whether you live till you're 100 or you live till you're 70. You get that same number every month, probably adjusted for inflation. That's called a defined benefit plan. We don't have many of those in our culture anymore. What we have are these 401ks and 403b plans. And if you have those or your kids have those, tell them to enroll in them, because a lot of them have matches. If you put in 2% of your salary, they will match that. And then they send it off and it can get invested and it can grow. And so I recommend that. There's some new catch-up rules, which means when you're over 50, you can put more into your defined contribution plan, which is the 401k and 403b. But if your adjusted gross income is over $145,000, it has to go into a Roth. So the tax advantages of doing that, if for the higher compensated people, have gone away. Or invest in individual retirement accounts. They can be tax-deferred accounts or they can be Roth accounts. When I was young, they didn't have Roth accounts, so it was like deferred tax accounts, but now that's very different for people. If you're self-employed, there's something called a self-employed IRA, individual retirement account, and it's way better than normal IRAs. You can actually contribute up to 25% of the net income of your business, up to $69,000 a year, into a self-employed person's IRA. So I think you should do that. We have what are called non-qualified plans. Some of you may have a tax-deferred plan that says, we're going to pay you $120,000 a year, and we're going to pay you another $60,000, but it's deferred until you reach the age of 70. So that's all fine until you don't pay tax on the extra until you actually get it. So if your companies have something like that, you should see if you can be involved in that, or a supplemental executive retirement plan, split life insurance plans they usually have for people. But those are all at risk. If HGB goes under, you lose everything. If you put money to 401k or 403b and your employer goes under, that money is still set aside for you in your retirement. And the other way is just save money. Just save money. You heard me before when I was here. Give as much as you can, save as much as you can, and never spend more than you have. So you can just say, I'm going to save money if I can't do these other things. Okay, let's talk about Medicare for a minute. And Medicare was a mystery to me, again, until I turned 60 or something. There's part A, B, C, and D. A, B, C, and D. A covers hospital costs. B covers doctors. C covers advantage plans. I'll talk about that in a minute. And D are the prescription drug plans. So that's the basic. For 2006, the premiums are $206 per month per person for Part A and B. So you're going to pay $412 a month for Medicare Part A and B. Part A has a deductible of $1,700. So you're paying $200 a month, and then you're going to pay another $1,700 for the benefit period. So if you're in the hospital and you've had an accident, the first money that you're going to pay is going to be $1,700. And then everything after that, the ICU, whatever costs are going to be picked up by Medicare. But that's per period. So if you had an accident in January and you had another one in July and you had another one in December, it's not like an annual deductible. A lot of you think annual deductibles, but it's not an annual deductible. It's a per event. And it only covers you for 60 days in the hospital. If you're in there for more than 60 days, which would be a very difficult case because hospitals try to boot you out as soon as they can, then you pay $429 per day. So you pay the $17.16. If you're there past 61 days, then you pay $429 per day. And then if they move you to a skilled nursing, then there's limits in the skilled nursing. I didn't write them down, but I think it's $220 a day you're paying. And you could end up in a skilled nursing for a long time. Now, the $206 a month is not the same number uniformly across every person in the United States. That can be adjusted if you make a lot of money. So it's kind of like the millionaire tax. If your adjusted gross income in your tax return is $1 million, you're going to pay more for the government health insurance than you would everybody else. And that becomes important a little bit later. So this you probably can't see. Oh, it's not too bad. So if you look on the left side, it says your filing status. So go down to married filing jointly. And if your adjusted gross income is less than $212,000, then I think this is the 25 premium because I couldn't find a chart for the 2026. It's $185. But if you make more than $212,000, if you make between $212 and $266, then go over to Part B premium, it goes up to $259. So instead of paying what everybody else pays, you pay even more. That if you make more money, more money, more money, more money, if you're making more than $750,000 a year, then your Medicare Part A and B is costing $628.90 per person per month for your medical care. I only tell you that because it will come in something I'm going to talk about in a minute. Part B, you've already paid the premium in Part A and B. The first $288 per person is your responsibility. Everything else is paid for by Medicare, which is a good deal. Plan C is for Advantage plans. Some of you may have Advantage plans, some of you may have Medigap plans. Advantage plans are an insurance company offers you this plan. It's outside of Medicare, and you pay them an additional premium, and they will cover some of these deductibles and copays. It's kind of like the normal health insurance you have. In fact, it's with a lot of them the same companies: Blue Cross, Blue Shield, Health Net, whatever. There's lots of companies that offer these, and they're an HMO type of plan. And they bundle a bunch of things together, and they make it look really good that you should go with them. They might give you dental, they might give you silver sneakers, they might give you all kinds of other benefits to try to get you to buy an Advantage plan. And then you don't pay the monthly amount for your premiums. You just pay that insurance company this amount, and they cover just about everything. So that is something available to you so you don't get stuck in some of those other costs. Part D is the prescription plans. You have a deductible of $615 per person per year for your meds. And then you have to pay copays until you've paid $2,100 for 2026 out of pocket. That was something that happened last year that really helped some senior people on the prescription plans. In addition to that, there's a Medigap plan, which is not an Advantage plan. So you pay the premiums that I talked about for A and B, and then you pay Blue Shield or Health Net or AARP has a plan, and USAA has a plan, and lots of people have plans, but it functions like a PPO. You can go to any doctor. You don't have to go to a specific doctor or their network. They're lettered, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You can't get an F anymore, but you can get a G. And they all have different levels of coverage. So the most expensive is G. I think it's $220 or thereabouts. As they call it Medigap. They pick up those big copays and deductibles that Medicare doesn't cover. They are the most expensive, and they're the most comprehensive. So if someone's trying to decide which one to do, you've already all decided because you're smart. Okay. And it's called Qualified Charitable Deductions. How many have heard of QCDs? A couple of you? Great. So the IRS says that you can have money taken out of your individual retirement account and sent directly to the church. And that will not be included in your taxable income when you're doing your personal tax returns. And so there's a benefit to you that you don't, if it's a tax-deferred IRA, whenever you take the money, they're going to take their tax. This is a little loophole for people over a certain age, of which I am almost there, that allows me to give money from my IRA directly to the church, and I never pay any income tax on it. And one of the things I'd love to do for you is to help you not pay income tax, because that gives you more money to give to the church, more money to take care of yourself. And so QCDs, I want to tell you a little bit about how they work. Not that you need to know the IRS code number. You must be 70 and a half years old to do this. So on November 9th, I turned 70 and a half, and this is going to be the only way that I give to my church going forward. The maximum amount you could give out of your IRA is 108. It's kind of like the 13 million, right? Who gives 108,000 a year anyway? But you can give from your IRA, if you're 70 and a half. If you're a married couple, you can give 216. And the money goes directly from your original or an inherited IRA, goes directly from Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley or whoever it is, directly to Compass Bible Church Hill Country. That's how it works. You can't get any goods or services in exchange for this, the same way you don't get any goods or services for exchange of your normal giving and donations that you make week in and week out. It goes directly to the church. You can do this every month. You can say, I want $100 to go from my IRA to Compass Bible Church Hill Country. You can do it every month. Or you could wait till the end of the year, and you could do it all at the end of the year. Some people like to wait to the end of the year because they say, well, I'm earning money the whole year. I'll have more that I can give, and so I'm waiting till the end of the year. Some people do it at the beginning of the year and say, I want the church's return on their investment to be higher. I want them to have the money sooner. I don't want it. Or you can do it whenever you want. The IRS provisions say you can do it anytime you want. And the donor does not recognize taxable income. So let's just say hypothetically yours was the $108,000, and you took that would be income to you, and it might adjust your adjusted gross income, and now you're paying more for your Medicare premiums than you should pay. See how that might work? If you can eliminate some of your income, then you can eliminate some of your adjusted gross income, and you might not have to pay some of those premiums for certain people. The flip side is you don't get a tax deduction for it because you never got it. You didn't have any income, so you didn't have any way to give it. But it's still, I think it's better for you, and it's better for the church. Let me show you why. We receive the entire amount. So let's say you had $10,000 that you wanted to take out of your IRA that would otherwise be taxable. It's going to be taxable income to you. The federal tax rate, I don't know what your federal tax rate is because I can't look at all your tax returns. It's either 10%, 12%, 22%, or 36%. It's some number. I don't know what that is. But if you take the distribution from your IRA, you're going to pay tax on it. And look at that state tax rate again. 0, which is why some of you live here. So your adjusted gross income increases by $10,000. If you're in a 20% tax bracket, you just paid Uncle Sam $2,000 because that's how it works. So if you were going to give $10,000 to the church, now you gave $8,000 to the church, and you gave $2,000 to Uncle Sam. If you do a QCD, because you're 70 and a half, and you give it directly to the church, and the federal tax rate is 20%, you pay no tax, zero, and now the church got $10,000 instead of the $8,000. Make sense? We get more for ministry. Some of you may have required minimum distributions that you have to take on your IRAs. So let's say you have to take $1,000 a month or $12,000 from your IRA, and you take it into your income, and then your normal pattern was to give $12,000 to the church anyway, or $500, or whatever the number is. If you do the QCD, you can use it for the required minimum distribution. So it's kind of like, why wouldn't you do this? Because you're giving it to us anyway. This allows you to give it to us directly, and you don't pay Uncle Sam anything. When I do this in California, it's like, I don't give Governor Newsom any money to play with, right? But you don't have that here. But your QCDs can even be more than your required minimum distribution. So if your required minimum distribution is $10,000, but you want to give $15,000 out of your IRA, you can do that. You just can't go above $108,000. And remember, your IRAs, for the most part, unless they're a Roth IRA, they're taxable to you. And they're taxable to your heirs. When you give that money to your kids, then they have to pay tax on it. If you give it to the church pays no tax on it. So you could look at your whole estate and you could say, this gets a little technical, but you could say, well, I was going to give the church 20% of my estate anyway. I would say, give us your IRA because we pay no tax on it. If you give it to your kids, they pay tax. So remember, I like to legally reduce or eliminate taxes. So if you thought you were going to give, let me just use round numbers, if your estate was worth $500,000 and you were going to give $100,000 to the church, then give us your IRAs. Because otherwise, if you give us $100,000 in cash and you give $100,000 of IRAs to your kids, and they're doing well and they're in a 30 or 40% tax bracket, they don't get $100,000. They only get the $100,000 minus the taxes. So to me, for people that are our age that have to take required minimum distributions and they're giving to the church anyway, you should really consider a QCD. It avoids your adjusted gross income. There are other things that get phased out because of adjusted gross income. It just isn't the Medicare premiums I'm worried about. For some taxpayers, certain things start going away depending on what your adjusted gross income is. Medicare premiums, you pay less tax. Here's another little quirky thing too. Federal income tax can be withheld on any of your, it says QCDs, it probably shouldn't say that, but if you take money from an IRA, you can have federal income tax withheld from that, and it's deemed to be held ratably over the year. So most of you aren't working, and you have income, although with the new standard deductions, you're not going to have much income, but you have to pay estimated tax payments. I don't know if you're doing it quarterly or you still have a job and it's withheld, but you can take federal income tax withholdings out of any distribution from an IRA. There's no maximum charitable deduction limitations, again, for the very wealthy. If you take your IRAs in and you say, well, I'm just going to turn around and give it to the church, well, maybe you're already giving more than 60% of your income to the church, and then you would not get a deduction for it. So that comes up every once in a while. Senior scams, you ready? Yes. Why are there senior scams?
We don't know what to do.
They work. They work. So I help run an adult Sunday school class in at least Viejo. I've done it for 15 years. And a sweet 82-year-old friend of mine got all the way to the point that she put $4,200 of denominations of $100 bills in a UPS next day delivery to go to somebody who was investigating Wells Fargo. There was somebody on the inside that was stealing money, and because of the amount of time she had a Wells Fargo bank account, that they knew that they could trust her. They needed somebody they could trust to catch the thief. And she took it all the way to the UPS store, and the guy on the phone said, "You got to do next day air because it's critical. We're about to nab this guy." And she saw it was like 4 times as much to send it next day air than 3 or 4 day ground, whatever it was. So she sent it 3 or 4 day ground because she was trying to save money. And he said, "You're going to get all this money back." And then she went home and finally told somebody what was going on. And they said, "Yeah!" And they were able to go down to the UPS store when it opened and get it, so it never went. That happened in the last 6 months. It happened to my mother-in-law. Somebody called her, and my mother-in-law says, "Oh, is this Sean?" Well, what did the guy say? Yes. And she wired $2,000, $3,000 over to somebody in Europe. And the reason you have these is that they work and they're getting more sophisticated. So, there's phone calls. The IRS will never call you. They'll send you a letter, and it looks the same all the time. I've looked at so many letters from the IRS, they look the same. We talked about the grandparent scam. Toll road scam in California is a big thing right now. You haven't paid yours, and it's gonna go away if you don't pay in the next 24 hours, and here's a link. Don't do it. Hey, we noticed your roof is not in compliance with the city code anymore, and we're here to help you fix it today so that you don't get caught. And here's our estimate, you really need to do this. In fact, we're having a rainy season, it's coming up, and and it's 20 times more expensive than it really needs to be. Caretakers are really hard. You hire somebody to care for your parents, or someone's going to care for a spouse because you can't do it anymore, they are going to try to rip you off. Even if the most trusted people, now your family members won't, and I'm not trying to be cynical, but you just have to be careful that they're there sometimes for their own advantage. You need this life insurance. You should really invest in this because, the guy came from California and he's selling a partnership interest in this, and we're only going to invest in things that are good for Compass Bible Church Hill Country. And since we're all going to the same church, you should all invest in this thing. Wrong. Never do that. Never, ever do that. Emails from someone you don't know. I can't tell you how many emails I got from my boss, Pastor Mike Fabarez, saying, "I need you to wire some money for me by 2 o'clock today." Or, "I need to change my bank account for my direct deposit." Or, "You need to do this." And if you go up and you just put that little arrow down, you can see who it's from, and it's never from the person you think it's from, although they're getting very sophisticated with that now. You might even get an email from somebody that looks like that's it. You might get a pop-up ad. Don't do it. Don't invest in Bitcoin from somebody that you don't know who they are or they're reputable, or even PayPal. I've seen spoofs on PayPal. It looks like a PayPal website. You've won something. Your account has fraud on it. And so we need you to correct it. And we need you to click on this link so we can help you correct it. You guys know all this. They can now get your face and get into things where you have facial recognition. So we just got to be aware if you do have a legit credit card notice, that you follow up on it if you don't recognize it. They can even do voice recognition now. I heard something that Charlie Kirk told us about what happened to him after he died. And it's crazy. Charities asking for money, free lunch to discuss investment options. Those are all around too. You can do those. Some of what we've talked about today. We'll take you to Texas Roadhouse and buy you lunch. Some of those are legit. They're trying to get you as a customer or a client of theirs so they can earn money off helping you invest your money. So, never give money to anybody that you don't know. Just don't do it. Stop and think about it. And as I used to say on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, phone a friend. This friend of mine that had $4,200, she finally told her daughter. So if anything looks funny to you or to me, and you're not sure, would you ask somebody in your life group, hey, I got this. Well, I don't know what it is. And they'll laugh at you, but say, that wasn't very kind. This is what's happening in my life. Don't open an attachment from anything. This is all stuff you already know, but see who the email's from. You know, when it first started, I used to get emails from Nigeria that I had won $1 million. All I had to do was put $5,000 in their account so they could transfer it to me. And there's misspellings and there's typos, and you know right away what it is. Look for grammar problems. If it's urgent, it probably isn't urgent. Never buy gift cards for someone. That one was going around. Never, ever give them personal information. If it's too good to be true, it isn't. Don't give them your bank accounts. Never give them your social security number, nothing. No credit card numbers, no birth dates. Don't call the number they give you. Talk to someone. Call the vendor. If it's Wells Fargo, like with my friend, I said, go to the branch and say, is the FBI doing a sting operation on somebody here? And they'll say, no, Mrs. Talcott, that's not legit. Please ignore it. And if they say they're from Wells Fargo, call the Wells Fargo number on your bank statement or the back of your credit card. Call those numbers and talk to somebody. And don't just delete the email forever. If you can use two-factor authentication, it's a pain, but I try to do that on all the things that I have. We have to do that at Compass on all the financial areas. And verify. Set legitimate alerts on your credit cards and limits. I love using a password manager. I think they're great. You get a password manager, it costs you a little bit of money, and you give them a nice big long password, and then you store all of those passwords on the cloud with them. And so then when I go to log into something, because I can never remember my passwords, that's a helpful trick to do as well. But really, all I really have to say is, would you please not be prideful, especially in areas like this, and please talk to somebody about it. Pick up the phone and call one of your pastors, talk to your life group leader, talk to your friends, because again, if it sounds too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. So there you go. So we have time for some questions now or tomorrow. Really, tomorrow I'm going to do some of the same things that I did today. And there'll be a couple different things. There's new tax legislation for seniors. Have you heard about that? So the standard deduction went up a little bit. And as a senior, you get $1,600 more per person. Now you get another $6,000 more per person. So that's $12,000 more in a standard deduction. 85 to 90% of all tax returns use the standard deduction. So this might help a lot of you in 2026, something that was in the big, beautiful bill. The one big, beautiful bill.
Rick,
yeah.
that goes into effect for the 2026 tax year, right?
Right.
The next return we file is the 2025 tax year, so it's the same.
Right. Some of those go retroactive, but I don't think that one does. Any other good questions? Any other bad? There's no such thing as a bad question. Okay, well, thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure being here.